the ocean is being overtaken by something. Additionally, governments don't want you to be aware of its current state. The Caribbean shoreline was struck in 2018 by a brown, decaying wall of seaweed that was larger than the entire United States. Overnight, hotels were empty. The same gas that rises from the Earth's deepest volcanic eruptions, hydrogen sulfide, strangled fishing settlements. Kids were kept inside. 6 feet of decaying biomass covered beaches that had provided food for decades. What about the official narrative? It's a natural occurrence. There is nothing to be concerned about. Here's what they failed to tell you though. In all of recorded history, this seaweed had never been seen here. It was set off by something. Something was altered. In southern Mexico, a small team of engineers silently examined 20 million tons of what the world considered to be a disaster, and they saw the future of building. Stay with me if that seems too bizarre to be real, because this becomes more bizarre the deeper it goes. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to see it, because this story is just getting started. To understand what happened, you have to go back centuries. Sargassum is unlike any seaweed on Earth. It doesn't root to the sea floor. It doesn't cling to rocks. It drifts, freely, endlessly, held together by tiny gas-filled pods called pneumatocysts that act like built-in life preservers, keeping entire floating islands of the algae suspended at the ocean's surface. Sargassum flourished for hundreds of years. Inside the Sargasso Sea, a sluggish, circular current system that covered 2 million square miles in the North Atlantic. When Christopher Columbus's ships almost got stuck inside its golden carpets in 1492, he wrote about it. Sailors called it the Sea of Weeds. There were many who thought it was the end of the world. But for all those centuries, it stayed in its lane. Then, sometime around 2011, the rules changed. Satellite imagery from the University of South Florida's Optical Oceanography Lab began detecting something alarming. The bloom, historically hovering around 1 million tons per year, started growing fast. By 2018, it had exploded to over 20 million tons. It had jumped out of the Sargasso Sea entirely and formed what scientists now call the Great Atlantic Sargassum Belt, a living, breathing mass of algae stretching 5,500 miles from the coast of West Africa all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, visible from space. Larger than any biological structure ever recorded in the open ocean. What woke it up? The leading theory involves a chain of events that reads almost like a curse. Accelerating deforestation in the Amazon basin, particularly between 2009 and 2015, stripped millions of acres of forest. Without tree roots to hold the soil, nitrogen-saturated sediment began bleeding into tributaries. Those tributaries fed into the Amazon River. The Amazon River dumps 300,000 cubic meters of fresh water into the Atlantic every single second. That nitrogen-rich sediment rode that current straight into the open ocean, and Sargassum drank it like a feast. Add warming ocean temperatures, disrupting the Atlantic's wind and current systems, and the algae didn't just grow, it migrated, and nobody was ready for what came next. By the summer of 2018, the Mexican state of Quintana Roo, home to Cancún, Playa del Carmen, and Tulum, was unrecognizable. "We couldn't even launch the boats," said local fisherman Rodrigo Canul, speaking to reporters in July of that year. The sargassum was so thick, the motors just choked. Hotel revenue in Cancun dropped by nearly 25% in a single quarter. The Mexican government deployed military units to manually clear beaches. Dump trucks ran 24 hours a day. The state spent an estimated $10 million in emergency removal efforts just in the first season, and every ton they hauled away, more arrived within days. Beneath the surface of the chaos, a question was forming. Not in any government office, not in any university lab, but in a small garage in the city of Felipe Carrillo Puerto. What if they were thinking about this completely backwards? Omar Vásquez Sánchez was a civil engineer by training, not a dreamer. He'd spent years working on low-income housing projects across Quintana Roo and understood one painful truth: conventional building materials were strangling the region's poorest communities. Hollow concrete blocks, the standard for affordable housing across Latin America, were cheap but punishing. They transferred heat like an oven wall. In a state where summer temperatures routinely hit 35 degrees Celsius, and air conditioning eats up nearly 60% of a household's monthly electricity bill, living in a concrete block home wasn't just uncomfortable, it was financially suffocating. He was staring at the piles of sargassum rotting on the coast when something clicked. Sargassum is loaded with cellulose, lignin, and polysaccharides, the same fibrous compounds found in wood, hemp, and agricultural waste that engineers had been experimenting with for decades as natural construction reinforcement. The algae wasn't just organic material, it was structural organic material. He started mixing. Early batches were a failure. The bricks cracked as they dried, they smelled, insects were drawn to the organic matter. His neighbours thought he'd lost his mind. "What exactly are you building, Omar?" "A compost pile." But he kept adjusting ratios: more clay, less sand, finer grind on the dried sargassum. And then, at a specific mixture, 20% sargassum fibre by weight, combined with 40% clay and 40% sand, something remarkable happened. The bricks didn't just hold, they exceeded every expectation. Compression testing revealed Vásquez's sargassum bricks could withstand 60 kilograms per square centimetre. Mexico's national building code requires a minimum of 35. His bricks beat it by over 70%. The reason comes down to cellular biology. When sargassum fibre is compressed and dried, the cellulose strands interlock with clear particles at the microscopic level, behaving almost like rebar embedded in concrete, distributing load across the entire structure rather than concentrating stress at any single point. The lignin, a natural polymer that gives plant cell walls their rigidity, acted as a chemical binder, reducing the need for Portland cement, one of the most carbon-intensive substances in modern construction. But the thermal performance was where things got genuinely extraordinary. Standard concrete has a thermal conductivity of approximately 1.7 watts per meter Kelvin, meaning heat passes through it relatively quickly. Vásquez's sargassum bricks measured just 0.45. That's a 73% reduction. In practical terms, a wall built from these bricks stays cooler during the heat of the day and holds warmth through cooler nights, all without a single kilowatt of electricity. Independent testing suggested passive cooling savings of up to 30% in tropical climates. And the carbon footprint? Traditional fired clay bricks require kilns burning at 1000 degrees Celsius. Vásquez's process used no kiln at all. He laid the bricks on elevated drying racks under mesh tarps, protecting them from direct UV degradation, while allowing Quintana Roo's fierce humidity and heat to cure them naturally. After 28 days, they reached full structural strength. No fuel burned, no emissions released. Carbon footprint, roughly 85% lower than conventional brick production. So why hadn't the whole world heard about this already? Here's where the story gets complicated and where the questions start piling up. Sargassum is saturated with ocean salt. Even after collection and washing, residual sodium chloride remains trapped deep inside the organic fibers. Left unaddressed, that salt slowly migrates to the surface of a brick as moisture moves through it, a process called efflorescence. In structural walls reinforced with steel rebar, migrating salt can trigger corrosion from the inside out. A wall that looks solid on the outside, quietly crumbling beneath the surface. The team went back to work. They developed a two-stage decontamination process. First, a freshwater rinse to strip surface salts, followed by a diluted acetic acid wash, essentially a vinegar solution, to chemically dissolve chlorides bonded to the organic compounds. After treatment, salt content dropped below 0.5% by weight, well under the threshold for structural risk. Then came the second problem. Sargassum harvested from different parts of the Caribbean contains measurably different chemical profiles. Blooms originating in the eastern Atlantic near deep ocean upwelling zones off the African coast showed elevated concentrations of heavy metals, including arsenic and cadmium, absorbed from mineral-rich, deep water. You couldn't just scoop algae off any beach and turn it into a building block. The team implemented mandatory batch testing. Every harvested ton is analysed before processing begins. Contaminated loads are either rejected entirely or rerouted to biogas digesters, where the energy is extracted without creating structural risk. This added cost. It also added credibility, and that credibility opened a door that would change everything. As of 2024, over 2 million Sargassum bricks have been produced and deployed across Quintana Roo, built into schools, community health centres, and affordable housing developments. The Mexican federal government has launched pilot programs in neighbouring Yucatan and Campeche states. Brazil, Barbados, and several West African coastal nations have opened exploratory partnerships to study the model. NOAA's latest projections forecast the 2025 Atlantic Sargassum bloom may exceed 24 million tonnes, potentially the largest ever recorded. If even a fraction of that material were processed into construction material at scale, researchers estimate the global construction industry could divert 5 to 8 million tonnes of sargassum per year. That volume alone could produce enough bricks to build 400,000 homes annually, all from material currently being hauled to landfills at taxpayer expense. But the infrastructure to do that globally doesn't exist yet. Collection networks, washing facilities, testing labs, distribution chains, building that from scratch takes an estimated 5 to 10 years minimum. And that window is exactly what makes the next few years critical. Because the moment industrial construction companies recognise that sargassum isn't a pollutant, that it's a feedstock, the dynamic shifts entirely. The race won't be to clean the beaches, it will be to own them. Something the ocean kept secret for centuries is sitting on the surface now, waiting. The only question is, who gets there first? Share this video, because the things they call disasters, sometimes they're the answers we weren't supposed to find.